morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of St. Grace's Hospital, painting soft streaks of gold on the polished floor. Nurse Emily adjusted the strap of her mask, clutching her clipboard a little too tightly as she checked her patient list for the day. She was always nervous around new assignments, her quiet nature often mistaken for inexperience. Her colleagues chatted easily, their laughter echoing through the corridor. But Emily preferred silence. It was where she felt safest. Yet today, her pulse quickened when she read the name on her list. Mrs. Anderson of VIP. Wing. She had heard about the Andersons, an influential family, with their empire built on technology and philanthropy. But what made Emily's stomach flutter wasn't the name. It was the note beside it. Patient is hearing impaired. Communication through sign language recommended. For a moment she hesitated. It had been years since she used sign language regularly. Memories of her younger brother flickered. Through her mind, his small hands forming shapes in the air, his laughter soundless yet full of life. Emily swallowed hard, then squared her shoulders. She wouldn't let her shyness or her memories stop her. She took a deep breath and made her way to the private suite. When the door opened, she saw an older woman sitting by the window, her silver hair neatly tied, her expression calm but distant. Mrs. Anderson turned as Emily entered. Her eyes alert yet uncertain, Emily smiled, placed a hand over her heart, and began signing. "Good morning. My name is Emily. I'll be your nurse today." For a brief moment, the older woman simply stared. Then her eyes softened and the faintest tremor of surprise crossed her face. She responded slowly, her fingers moving with elegance. "You sign?" Emily nodded, signing back, "Yes, I learned when I was young." The change in Mrs. Anderson was immediate. Her shoulders relaxed and her lips curved into a genuine smile. She reached out, lightly squeezing Emily's hand before signing again. "It's nice to meet someone who speaks my language." As Emily helped her settle comfortably, adjusting the pillows and checking her vitals, a quiet warmth filled the room. The air no longer felt clinical. It felt human. Mrs. Anderson began to tell her short stories about her garden, her late husband, the joy of music she could only feel through vibrations. Emily responded with attentive nods and hands that moved like poetry. Neither woman noticed the tall figure standing just outside the door. Ryan Anderson, CEO of Anderson Tech and Mrs. Anderson's only son, had come to check on his mother between meetings. He stopped when he saw Emily, her hands moving gracefully in a silent conversation that made his mother laugh, a sound he hadn't heard in weeks. His heart tightened unexpectedly. He had hired countless people to make his mother's life easier, but no one had ever made her light up like this shy nurse just had. Ryan stood motionless outside the door, his hand still on the frame, as he watched his mother laughing in near silence with the young nurse. The gentle rhythm of their gestures, the unspoken ease between them, it felt like stepping into a world he didn't belong to, one where noise wasn't power, and presence alone could comfort. For years, Ryan had been surrounded by people who spoke too much, employees, investors, journalists, all eager to impress him. Yet this woman, with her soft eyes and quiet grace, said everything without uttering a word. He hadn't planned to intrude, but curiosity tugged at him. When Emily stepped out to fetch something, she nearly bumped into him. "Oh, I'm sorry," she stammered, her cheeks turning pink as she looked up at him. Her badge glinted under the fluorescent lights. Emily Carter, RN. "It's all right," he said smoothly, his voice deep but calm. "You're my mother's nurse?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I hope I'm not overstepping. She seems to prefer communicating in sign. So you sign?" He interrupted, genuinely surprised. She nodded again, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I learned when I was a teenager. My younger brother was deaf. It just stuck with me." There was something fragile in her tone, something that made Ryan pause. Most people spoke to him as if they were standing before a throne. She spoke like every word was a careful offering of honesty. He followed her back into the room. His mother smiled brightly upon seeing him, her fingers already signing with a kind of excitement he hadn't seen in ages. Emily watched their exchange silently, waiting until his mother gestured toward her. "She's saying," Emily translated gently, "that you should be nicer to your staff, and that she likes me." Ryan raised an eyebrow, trying to hide the smile tugging at his lips. "She always finds allies quickly," he murmured. Mrs. Anderson chuckled silently, her eyes twinkling. Emily busied herself checking the IV line, trying not to notice the way Ryan's gaze followed her. There was something disarming about him up close. The sharp lines of his face softened by an almost weary kindness. He looked like a man who carried too much and rested too little. "Thank you for helping her," he said suddenly, his tone quieter now. "Emily?" The following days unfolded with a quiet rhythm that soothed Mrs. Anderson and, unexpectedly, began to calm Ryan as well. Emily's shifts were filled with gentle conversation in sign language, soft smiles, and moments of laughter that transcended sound. Every morning when she entered the room, Mrs. Anderson's face would light up as if an old friend had arrived. Emily brought her small comforts: fresh flowers from the hospital garden, a lavender-scented hand cream, and stories told through expressive gestures. Her hands danced in the air as she described the antics of other patients or the way rain looked from her apartment window. Mrs. Anderson, captivated, watched every movement with gratitude and delight. Ryan often found himself lingering by the door, pretending to check on administrative details, or taking calls near his mother's room just to listen to that peaceful silence. He watched Emily's patience, her gentleness, the way she never treated his mother as fragile but as vibrant and capable. It fascinated him. One afternoon when he walked in unannounced, he found them both laughing, his mother's shoulders shaking soundlessly while Emily signed something that made her grin even wider. The sight made Ryan forget to breathe. For months his mother had withdrawn into herself, refusing visitors, refusing joy. And now here she was, alive again, all because of this quiet nurse who didn't seem to realize the power she carried. When Emily noticed him, she straightened quickly. "Mr. Anderson," she said softly, embarrassed. "We were just laughing," he finished, smiling faintly. "Something I haven't seen her do in a long time. Don't apologize." His mother gestured toward him, signing quickly. Emily's eyes sparkled as she translated. "She says you look better when you smile." "Too," he chuckled, shaking his head. "She's right, as usual." After that, Ryan began staying longer during his visits. Sometimes he brought documents to review in the corner of the room, pretending to work while his gaze often wandered to Emily. He noticed the small details, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, how she adjusted his mother's blanket with gentle precision, the quiet focus in her eyes when she listened. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, least of all him. And perhaps that was what made her stand out the most in his world full of people chasing his attention. One evening, when Mrs. Anderson fell asleep early, Ryan offered Emily a cup of coffee from the machine down the hall. She hesitated but followed. The hallway lights flickered faintly as they stood by the window, overlooking the city. The night rain fell in steady sheets, drumming softly against the hospital windows as the halls emptied one by one. Emily had stayed past her shift again, finishing her charting and making sure Mrs. Anderson was comfortable before heading home. Her feet ached, and her mind was heavy with the day's quiet emotions. She stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby, just as the doors began to close, and suddenly a hand stopped them. Ryan stepped inside, his umbrella dripping rain onto the floor, his tie loosened, his eyes tired but alert. "Working late?" he asked with a faint smile. "Always," Emily replied shyly, hugging her bag close. Before either could say more, the elevator shuddered and came to a jarring stop between floors. The lights flickered, then dimmed to a dull glow. Emily gasped, her breath catching as anxiety tightened her chest. Ryan pressed the emergency button. "It'll be fine," he said calmly, though his own pulse quickened. He noticed how pale she looked, how tightly she gripped her bag. "You okay?" he asked softly. Emily nodded quickly, but her trembling hands betrayed her. "I'm just not good with small spaces." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Trying to distract her, Ryan leaned against the wall and said, "Then let's talk. Tell me something I don't know about you." She hesitated, still catching her breath. "There's not much to tell." "There's always something," he said. After a pause, she murmured, "My younger brother was deaf. He died when I was 16. I learned sign language for him so he wouldn't feel alone. After he passed, I couldn't stop using it. It feels like he's still listening somehow." Her words hung in the air like a fragile truth. Ryan's expression softened, the distance between CEO and nurse fading into nothing. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That must have been hard." Emily nodded. "It was. But it also taught me that silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it's where you find the most meaning. The elevator hummed faintly as the emergency lights blinked. Ryan looked at her differently now, not as an employee, but as someone who understood loss the way he did. "You're remarkable, you know that," he said. Emily's lips curved into a shy, uncertain smile. "I'm just a nurse." "No," he replied, shaking his head. "Your weeks turned into something soft and golden." Every evening after Emily's shift ended, she and Ryan would meet in the hospital garden, under the canopy of climbing vines and faintly glowing lamps. The hum of the city faded there. Only the rustle of leaves and the quiet rhythm of their hands filled the air. Ryan was clumsy at first, his fingers stiff, his expressions uncertain, but Emily's laughter made the lessons light. She corrected his hand shapes gently, her fingertips brushing his as she guided him through each motion. "You're learning fast," she signed one evening. Ryan shook his head, smiling. "I have a good teacher." The words, though silent, seemed to linger between them like the warmth of sunlight through leaves. Mrs. Anderson often watched from her wheelchair nearby, pretending to read a magazine while her eyes twinkled at their every exchange. She saw something forming in the space between them, something tender, unspoken but undeniable. Emily had become more than a nurse to her. She was a friend, a comfort, and now, the quiet light that reached her son's heart. One afternoon, as Ryan stumbled through a particularly tricky sentence, his mother laughed and signed teasingly. "You move your hands like you're making business deals, not words." Ryan grinned sheepishly, and Emily laughed so hard she had to sit down. The sound of it, the real ringing laughter, made something bloom inside him. As days passed, the lessons stretched beyond the garden. Ryan began visiting even on days when his schedule overflowed. He brought coffee for Emily, sometimes pastries, sometimes excuses just to see her. One evening, the three of them sat, together watching the sunset through the glass wall of the lounge. Mrs. Anderson signed something slowly, her movements deliberate. Emily's eyes softened as she translated. "She says, 'Don't be afraid. You both make each other better.'" Emily froze, her breath catching. Ryan, who had been watching his mother's hands, understood even without translation. His throat tightened. He turned toward Emily, his voice low. "She's right." Then, to his mother's astonishment, he lifted his hands, clumsy but certain, and signed his first full sentence. "I already do." Emily's eyes shimmered. The moment felt suspended in stillness, the garden lights flickering, the world holding its breath. She reached out, her fingers finding his, and in that touch was everything they hadn't said. Mrs. Anderson smiled knowingly, turning her gaze toward the fading sky. For once, the silence around them wasn't empty. It was full of promise, love, and the unspoken beauty of two hearts learning to speak the same language.